All right, welcome to our Task 2 feedback for Band 8 and Band 9 students. We get quite a few essays today, so why don't we go ahead and take a look at the prompt. It says, some experts believe that it is better for children to begin learning a foreign language at primary school rather than secondary school. Do the advantages of this outweigh the disadvantages? So quite a lot to cover in the prompt. We've got primary school, we have secondary school, we have the foreign language, and we need to make sure that we cover both sides, but also have a really consistent view. To me, outline B is the most obvious choice for this, where in the first body paragraph you have the side that you disagree with, and then in the second body paragraph, the side that you agree with. So let's see if we have that kind of approach from most of you, which is what I expect. We'll start with this essay from Anyi. And Anyi, it's a pretty nice essay. Pretty decent approach. I think if we look at the body paragraphs, you can see this side is not really developed enough. When we compare it to this side, we have a lot more. And I think you did a couple of things here. You talked only about pronunciation and accent. I think this topic, when you're talking about the mother language replacing, English replacing their mother language, might be more than just about pronunciation and accent. I think you could develop this topic a little bit more. And then in this paragraph, I thought it was pretty good. Let's see, there was a couple of things. Let's see. Oh, this sentence here, to me, was a little bit strange. I couldn't quite figure out. You said their foreign mother language. And to me, foreign and mother language are the opposite, right? I'm not sure what you mean here by foreign. I think Australia is a bit of a strange case because Australia has many national languages, or maybe not national languages, but they have a native population that has their own language. Australia and South Africa are kind of complex. They have a complex national mother tongue, I guess, or national language that they use. So, it seemed a little strange. I think I know what you were saying, but it took me a few times of reading it and adjusting it to make it sound natural. So, a little problem there. But other than that, pretty good. I think this topic is pretty well developed on that side. Now, a couple of language notes with your cohesion and coherence. There's a couple of strange things. Watch out with how you use drawback. Use drawback a couple of times here in a kind of a strange way. Also, these connections here, as is a conjunction, so you can't use it just at the beginning of a sentence like this. Just check that video on cohesive devices, and that should help you. And then, let's see, despite as well, be careful with that, how you use that. And here, you wrote this all in one sentence, but you actually have two separate clauses here. You need to make sure to separate that. I think cohesion and coherence, there was a chance for you to score a little bit higher, but because of those mistakes, it's going to stay at a 6. Task achievement, one side needed to be more completely developed. Grammar and vocabulary, there's just enough grammar mistakes to limit your score. And the same with vocabulary, just a few, the way you use drawback, especially kids, is a little bit informal for this type of writing. Country language, let's see, adulthood life, just a few vocabulary slips that are going to cause you to be limited to a 6 here. So overall, I think a 6 is probably a fair score. A couple of adjustments and you would be up to that 6.5 level. And if you can improve these areas, you'll have a chance at a 7 as well. All right, Raween, let's go ahead and take a look at your essay here. So overall, it's kind of similar to the essay that we just saw in that it doesn't quite cover the entire topic that well. It's pretty okay, as you can see in your scores. You're going to get 6s here, but it's not really going to get above a 6. So let's look at kind of the problems here. First of all, this therefore, I don't quite catch the connection between these two sentences. You said language is really important. Therefore, some people argue that it's better to start in primary school than to start later. I'm not sure if I see the cause and effect between these sentences. It started out just a little bit strange. Let's see. I think overall, I wasn't sure about which one was your opinion. Okay, so we've got advantages, disadvantages. I need to know your opinion throughout the essay. So you kind of hid it in your topic sentence, which is okay as long as you're making it clear from the start here. But the way that you introduce these ideas, I'm not sure which ones you agree with, right? So that's kind of the issue here with task achievement, is your ideas are not totally clear until here, your opinion, your stance, okay? Looking through the kind of green pieces, here, I think you're trying to introduce another idea here right at the end. But you don't really have time to develop this idea in this paragraph. You're just kind of throwing it in at the last second. And then this as well, right? You need time to develop an idea. This is why I always recommend a one idea paragraph or a two idea paragraph. There's just not enough time or space to develop three ideas. And this is what ends up happening, is you get this undeveloped idea at the end. And the problem there is that the reader, you're actually giving the reader more questions than answers. So, as a reader, I read this and I say, why is that? Why do older children have more activities to do? Are younger children less busy than older children? Maybe, but I need some examples. I need you to explain why or how that is. Okay? So then the conclusion as well, the last sentence, I like that you included some kind of future meaning, but you don't want it to be very specific. And you don't really want it to repeat an idea that you had up here. Okay? The final thing that I want to mention is you talk here about how most schools limit the choices for students, the primary school students. I think they would also limit those choices in high school, So I don't think this is really a difference between high school and grade school. I think this is just a problem with it's also not a problem with the idea. Okay? It's not a problem with learning language in school. It's a problem with the execution of that idea, the kind of practical execution. So I don't think it really belongs in this essay, because you're not talking about the advantages and disadvantages of this idea. You're talking about the way that it's done in most schools is not ideal. It's not quite getting to the core point of the idea, I think. All right, so a few problems here and there, a couple of vocabulary and grammar issues as well. We're going to kind of limit you here. So I think 6 is across the board. Same score as the previous essay, actually. I felt a little weird about that, but yeah, I can't see any of these categories getting below or getting anything above a 6, unfortunately. So a 6 for this time. I think, work on your paragraph organization a bit. Try not to put too many ideas in there, and really try to get to the core of the issue. All right, our next essay is from Amy. And Amy, this is a pretty good approach, I think. I think if we've got a little bit different thesis statement that we've seen, in that you're being very direct about what your opinion is. And that's a good idea here, because when you set up exactly what your opinion is in the introduction, there's a little bit less pressure to make your stance really clear in your writing, because we already know what your stance is, right? And the way that you organize the paragraphs in that typical outline B format, when we know the idea, then we can recognize, okay, this is that kind of outline B format that we're used to. I think this idea can be explained a little more thoroughly, however. You've got basically this sentence which says there are disadvantages. I think, in fact, it's just one disadvantage. And then you really only have 3 sentences which explain what it is. And it's quite a simple idea, right? It's too stressful for a student to study hard at another language. There's also a little bit of a strange thing where you've got socializing here. Oh, no, sorry. Never mind. Yeah, this is consistent. Yeah, this just needs more development, really. Yeah, the ideas are a little too simple, not quite digging deep enough. Studying is inefficient. I'm not sure what you mean by that exactly, inefficient. Would students learn better in secondary school, or is it a matter of not wanting children to feel like a language is, not fun? Is it more important that we stress that learning a new language can be fun? And is that better to do in secondary school? There's something missing there. I'm not quite putting the pieces together here. And this idea is okay, but I think it needs a little bit more as well. Yeah. The ideas here, you've got that they're fast learners, right? And then I think you're adding another idea here, which means this topic sentence doesn't actually cover everything in the paragraph. So reading this paragraph, it didn't quite fit together as I would hope it would. So overall, not bad. I think the conclusion, you're also just, in the conclusion, you want to be able to step back and kind of generalize your ideas. You're being a little too specific in your conclusion because you're actually saying exactly what you set up here and here, right? So yeah, try to take a step back and explain your ideas here in one sentence, both ideas in one sentence, but in a more broad way, in a more kind of general, big picture kind of way. And then in this last sentence, you can give some kind of future prediction or hope or fear, something like that. Okay? So task achievement, not quite there. We didn't really dig deep enough here and explain the ideas thoroughly enough. Cohesion and coherence is okay. The paragraphs fit together 6 or 7 here for coherence and cohesion. Grammar and vocabulary are at level 7. Still some problems. The main issue in terms of grammar is here where you switched from present tense. Right? They are, the curiosity is beneficial, right? Children are fast learners. Their minds are still fresh. And here you talk about it will become a strain. It will be confusing. We shouldn't switch to future here. This is not an idea that might happen in the future. This is happening right now, so it should be present tense. Okay? So overall, 6.5. I think you've got the skills to get a little bit higher score than this if you just dig a little deeper into the topic and explain things a little more thoroughly. All right, next we've got Christian's essay. All right, Christian, pretty good approach. So Christian tried a outline C approach, which actually worked pretty well. I think for this particular topic type, the advantages and disadvantages, I think outline B makes a little bit more sense, but at the same time, this kind of worked. You didn't do, it worked pretty well, I'll say that. So we have here the ideas about why language skills are important. So I think you spent a little bit too much time explaining the benefits of learning another language, which isn't really necessary according to the topic. We should be spending our time comparing these two options. You don't really need to expend so much time on this because now you don't have much time to explain why primary school is the best time. Your main argument here is that the earlier the better, which is not maybe a deep enough reason or a deep enough argument to be really successful in this essay. And then here you've got your counter argument, right, saying that maybe kids don't quite have enough time. However, yeah, their brain is kind of developing at this time, so maybe this is the most interesting time for them to do it. Maybe the time when they would be most interested in doing it. So this could be developed maybe a little bit more, but a pretty good approach to this paragraph. Okay, so overall, I thought task achievement was not bad. Cohesion and coherence, there's just too many grammar mistakes to really follow your arguments that well. You can see the grammar is definitely the lowest thing. Vocabulary, you had some decent stuff there. As I've kind of always said with your essays, I would like you to write more simply. You did a better job with your sentence structure. Just one mistake with the sentence structure, not separating these two. So you did a good job separating your sentences. Just make your sentences shorter. Yeah, you don't really have the grammar skills to be writing such complex sentences. It just gets you into a lot of grammar trouble, and it makes it hard to follow your ideas. So luckily I followed them well enough to be able to give you a 5 for your cohesion and coherence, but you're in danger, with that really advanced grammar, you're in danger of making the reader unable to understand your ideas, which would really hurt this area. Okay? So if you want a higher score for this, write more simply with less complexity. Okay? So overall a 5. Still looking for that grammar progress to move you up to that next level. All right, next we have an essay from Topeka. Topeka, pretty good grammar and vocabulary, and the paragraphs are organized well, but the task achievement is not there. Okay, so the advantages and disadvantages of learning in primary school rather than secondary school. Okay, so what we actually have here is the disadvantages of learning in high school, right, at a latter stage of school, right, and then the advantages of studying at an early age. Okay, so you're not really looking at both sides of the issue. What we need is the disadvantages of studying in primary school, right, or in other words, the benefits of studying in high school. Right, so we're looking at, the idea is primary school is better than high school. Look at both sides of that argument. Okay, so you need to look at kind of the disadvantages of primary school as well as the advantages, and you're missing those disadvantages of primary school. Okay, so one thing that I would suggest, you've got, this paragraph is actually pretty good. Here you have 3 arguments, right? You've got firstly, secondly, and lastly. I find that it's often the case that you're not able to fully explore all 3 of these areas. That the paragraph would be better if you spent a little more time on 2 of those rather than adding a 3rd. It's not bad though. That being said, you did do a pretty good job of developing them. You have at least 2 sentences for each of these, which is okay, just a little bit long. So overall, it's the task achievement. That's the issue, right? You didn't really cover both sides. Everything else is pretty good. Again, with your vocabulary, there's some moments where you're kind of reaching a little bit. I noticed this with all of our essays so far anyway, that this first sentence, the need to try to paraphrase this completely causes people to, I don't know, get a little bit off the track in terms of their vocabulary, because primary standard, I know we're trying to paraphrase primary school, but primary standard just doesn't quite work. Or then at secondary level, maybe at this secondary level doesn't quite work. So be careful when you're paraphrasing. It's better to be accurate and a little bit repetitive rather than inaccurate, but away from the original. So just be a little bit more careful there. Yeah, a few times here, higher classes, linguistics skills should just be language skills. Let's see, for the longest time is not quite the right phrase, and then prospects instead of perspectives. Overall, pretty good though. Yeah, you're using some good vocabulary, just a few mistakes keeping you from anything higher. Okay, our next essay is from Mandy. Mandy, let's take a look here. So in the introduction, you had this little problem with however. Be careful there. That's one of those cohesive devices that's going to hurt your cohesion and coherence skills. Just remember, however cannot be used to link 2 full ideas like this. You're going to need to do a full stop and start the sentence again with however. Okay? Introduction may be a little bit wordy, a little bit longer than necessary, I think. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4 sentences. I think you could probably do this in 3. 4 sentences is always a little bit too much. In this first paragraph, we got a little bit off the track by bringing up English, and you did this later in the essay as well. I know that you're just doing kind of an example here, but remember the topic is not about English learning necessarily. It's about learning a foreign language. And I know that English is the most common foreign language to learn, but we shouldn't get too specific in what we're talking about. And then you talked specifically about promoting English speaking while inside the school premises at all times, right? Now this is a good point that this is maybe a negative development, but that's not what the topic is about. The topic is not about using English in school at all times. The topic is learning a foreign language from an early age, right? So I think this is an interesting idea, but you developed it in a way that was too specific for this topic. Now this next paragraph is pretty good. Let's see here. Yeah, you talk about how kids in high school or kids in high school maybe not, their brains are not at the right stage of development to learn a foreign language. Oops. Yeah, so I thought that was pretty well explained here. Yeah, and then in the conclusion, again, you mentioned the teaching of English. Again, that's not exactly the topic, so I'll be a little bit careful there. So task achievement, you're going to sink down to a 6. A really strict examiner may even push that down to a 5. Cohesion and coherence, not bad. That 6 level. Again, the coherence in the first body paragraph, the fact that those ideas are too specific for the topic, that's going to limit you a bit there. Grammar's pretty good. A couple issues here and there, but vocabulary, yeah, just a couple of incorrect word choices that are going to get you in trouble there. So it's good to try this kind of stuff in your practice, but make sure in the real exam, try to keep it a little more simple. Try to avoid those vocabulary problems. Don't take any risks in the real exam. All right, next let's look at an essay from Marco. Marco, pretty good job here. There's a couple of little moments that didn't quite work for me, but overall pretty good. Starting out, this first sentence, I'm not quite sure what you mean here. The advent of means of communication. Means of communication, do you mean language, or do you mean some kind of technology? I'm not sure what you mean. If it's technology, then I'm not sure what the connection is to learning languages. And yeah, maybe it is technology. I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure how it connects to this idea of primary versus secondary school. Regardless if it's technology or language, I don't quite get the connection there. But otherwise, a pretty good introduction. This is really nice. Starting out, I really like your approach here. So starting with admittedly, going through the benefits. I think this paragraph would be more clear if instead of talking about the benefits of secondary school, you talked about the disadvantages of starting in primary school, right? You would have the same ideas, just phrasing them a little differently, because when we get here, it becomes a little bit strange. Despite the advantages above, I believe this is more beneficial. You can see that you're not really describing them as advantages versus disadvantages. You're describing them as advantages of secondary school, advantages of primary school. They're the same ideas, but just to make sure you're really hitting this task achievement perfectly, I would phrase this paragraph differently. I hope you see what I mean there. Now moving on, let's see, the rest of this paragraph, or this paragraph actually went really well. Really good example, and then, yeah, as I've mentioned, if you give a specific example, well, yeah. Actually, I guess I would kind of like you to finish the example by saying something that refers back to the more general idea. Same thing here. You finish here with an example. I'd like to see you finish by pointing back to the main idea after the example. But the conclusion went pretty well. So overall, I think this is going to be kind of tight. Maybe 6 to 7 on the task achievement. Cohesion and coherence went okay. Again, kind of finishing with those examples takes away just a little bit, and the connection between these paragraphs, as I said, was a little bit awkward just because advantages, right? But yeah, grammar is the area that you're so close to a 7, but there's just too many kind of issues. This issue with however here, and well, maybe I was, some of these kind of more basic mistakes, like, you know, such as, and other subjects, right? Maybe 6 is a little too strict. I might move that up to a 7. So you're very close. All of your areas are right kind of between a 6 and a 7. I feel like if you had a really good day, a really good essay, you would hit that 7, but you're always, at the moment, in a little bit of danger of slipping to a 6.5, okay? So you're right close to that 7. I know that 7 would be a kind of nice goal to hit, and you're almost there. I think last week you got a 7, but for now, you're right on the edge. So 6.5 for this one. You came really close, but not quite there. All right, our next essay is from Nietzsche. Nietzsche, pretty nice job here. Yeah, I like the approach. One thing that I would change is you started by explaining the advantages, and then you explain the disadvantages. But your opinion is that that it's advantageous. Right? So you actually agree with this idea. So according to the outline B structure that I introduced in the video course, you should start with the ideas that are against your opinion, right? And then link them despite the disadvantages, and then make your opinion clear here. Despite the disadvantages, I believe the advantages outweigh them, right? So that you make that stance really clear throughout. Actually, I think I might even change this just a little bit. I think if you switch those paragraphs and make your stance clear in this paragraph, you would be at a 7 for task achievement. But because, yeah, starting out reading, I don't know what your opinion is here. I still don't know what your opinion is. I still don't really know what your opinion is. I only learn what your opinion is here, right? So take a look at some of the other essays in this video. You're going to see, by switching this, saying some people believe that there are many disadvantages. However, I believe that the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. And I know you said I believe here, but you believe that there are a lot of advantages. I still don't know if you believe that the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. Okay, so the stance is not clear. That's the main thing. Okay? Other than that, just some grammar issues and some vocabulary issues. Nothing quite good enough to get up to a 7. Cohesion and coherence, the ideas, as I said, don't quite work in this order. Switching them would make a little bit more sense to me. And then a couple of these cohesive devices were not quite correct. Let's see here, this therefore and the so here should be used as therefore. And the grammar mistakes, you've got some kind of will and would problems, and just here and there. I think everybody had some trouble paraphrasing primary school. You can't really say primary level or primary grade. It's not the same thing, right? Primary school is that whole time period from 1st grade to 6th grade, or 1st grade to 5th grade maybe. You can't really paraphrase it without saying something like secondary school students, right? So instead of trying to substitute the phrase primary school, instead trying to rephrase the whole sentence would be a better option there. Okay, that's going to help you avoid repeating, primary school, primary school, primary school. Avoid repeating that by changing the sentence structure instead of just changing the phrase. Okay? So overall, 6, close to a 6.5. Pretty good. I think changing a couple things, especially the order of the body paragraphs, would help a lot. All right, next up we'll go to this essay from Maria. Maria, pretty nice job on the approach. Let's kind of go through it. I noticed that in your introduction, the grammar is actually more complicated, and therefore you're making these kind of mistakes in the introduction and conclusion. These parts of the essay should really be kept as simple as you can, just because you need the clarity to be really strong. Okay, clear, short, simple sentences are better in the introduction and conclusion, as well as the kind of topic sentences. This was a pretty complex sentence. You pulled it off well, but a couple of little grammar mistakes in there could cause a problem for your cohesion and coherence, and even your task achievement. And here, this is a nice simple sentence. I like this. Okay? So in your introduction, just try to keep it a little bit more simple. Same with your conclusion. Okay? I thought this paragraph was really good. You did mention English, but you used it kind of in an illustration, which is fine. This paragraph, you actually used English as one of your ideas here. Right? Here you said foreign language like English, that's fine. But then this argument is all about English. Okay, so imagine if you are reading this as like a British person, right? British people use English as their native language. So this argument doesn't really make sense for them, right? So just keep in mind, this topic had nothing about English, and for the most part you did a good job avoiding using English except in an illustration or kind of an example. It's just this part right here, yeah, it's not going to work except in countries where English is not the main language. And I know that you're from one of those countries. You just have to be careful. Keep it as general as it needs to be. This is too specific for this topic. Okay? Other than that, pretty good. Okay? So task achievement, that area is going to hurt your task achievement because it's too specific. Okay? But otherwise, you'd probably be up at a 7. Cohesion and coherence, pretty good. Yeah, you used your cohesive devices really well. And the grammar, just a few too many mistakes to reach a 7. You're pretty close, but yeah, especially in the introduction and conclusion, the grammar kind of slips. The body, you can see, is actually pretty clean. It's just the introduction, like this sentence was kind of a mess. So you're close. Maybe 6 is maybe a little bit harsh, but not quite enough for a 7. Vocabulary, pretty good, though. Yeah. So 6.5 overall, a couple of changes and some simpler sentences in your introduction and conclusion, and you would probably have a 7. So you were close. But 6.5 is still a pretty good score for this essay. It was a pretty tough one. All right, and our last essay here is from Shiv. And Shiv, you wrote a pretty nice essay here that got just a little bit off topic at times. Okay, so we want to stay focused on primary school versus secondary school. And I think there were some moments where you focused on the advantages of learning a second language instead of staying focused on that difference between them. So if we look through your body paragraphs, let's see. Yeah, you talked about, it enables them to be more competitive and proficient, right? You spent quite a bit of time talking about the advantages in the job market. Well, these would be advantages to learning a language in general. Right? And you mentioned here that young children can grasp things a little more quickly. I'd like you to stay focused on that instead of getting sort of distracted by talking about kind of all of the advantages of learning the language as a whole. Right? And even here, I think this is a really good idea, but yeah, I'd like you to stay focused on why young children, right? It's better to teach young children this because they are at a better stage of development to kind of form their opinions and their ideas about the world, right? So really good ideas just slipped off the topic just a little bit. And then in this paragraph, you kind of had this strange kind of moment at the very end talking about how, but this doesn't really happen very often, right? And the reason that this came up, the reason that you had this trouble here is because these two body paragraphs should be switched. Okay, so following outline B, which is in the video strategy guide, you want to start with the opposite opinion. You want to start here. Admittedly, there are some issues, right? And then you don't have to. The reason that you added this sentence is because you don't want to finish the essay talking about the disadvantages, right? So it's like, oh, I want to add something here saying, yeah, but these disadvantages are not so bad. The reason you're having that issue is because this paragraph right here should be first, and then this paragraph should be second. Okay, and instead of despite the drawbacks below, it would say despite the drawbacks above, right, which makes a lot more sense. Okay, so for next time, if you're following outline B, make sure that you have the opposite idea first and then your idea second, because that connects really well into your conclusion. Okay, let's see. And so this body B is another area where you got a little away from the topic just because this has nothing to do with primary versus secondary school, right? This cost of second language education, this is true for students of all ages, right? And I think this as well, okay? It's not about primary versus secondary school. So you got off the topic a little bit as you went. So it's going to limit your task achievement to a 6. Some examiners might even put it at a 5, okay? Cohesion and coherence, the ideas didn't quite fit because you had them switched, right? And then grammar, I was tempted to give you a 7 for this, but there's just too many little mistakes here and there, okay? Mostly with these prepositions, okay? Cope with, devote time to something, result in stress. Let's see here. Yeah, this in other words didn't quite work. As a result would be better. Let's see, deprived of instead of deprived from. Stand them in good stead. That's more of a vocabulary issue. Overall vocabulary was pretty good. Okay, just too many grammar mistakes to really get up to a 7. Okay, so 6.5 I think is a pretty fair score. Some examiners might drop this down to a 5, but I think 6.5 is pretty accurate. Okay, so pretty nice job there, and a nice job from everybody. We struggled a little bit staying on point, staying on message with our essays this week. So I hope in our next one we make sure to really hit the topic directly, right to the core of the topic, instead of kind of dancing around it a little bit. Okay, so nice job, everybody, and thanks for watching. I'm looking forward to next week's essays. All right, see you later.